Today we're diving into strengths and weaknesses, your superpowers and kryptonite that help you achieve financial independence and also can lead to your demise. I'm reminded of the movie Stranger Than Fiction, one of my all-time favorite classics, where Will Ferrell hears the narrator say, "Little did he know that the simple, seemingly innocuous act would result in his imminent death." Should you lean all the way into your strengths and forget everything about your weaknesses? Or maybe you should try to balance everything like you would a workout at the gym, where you have your chest and arms and all the things, legs. Maybe that's the right way. Are our strengths leading us astray? And finally, does adversity birth Titan? I'm Will Mosley. I've read hundreds of books about self-development, consumed thousands of hours on the topic, and have had 35 years to self-reflect on the meaning of life. I'd love to share my take on strengths and weaknesses with you today. I personally struggled early in my life at finding anything exceptional about myself in my existence. Growing up in the projects, being the runt of my siblings, losing both of my parents, one to death and one to abandonment, underperforming in almost every class that I took from early grade school all the way up to high school, and worst of all, stumbling through romance. All of this made me feel unwanted, unneeded, shunned, an outcast. The only thing that kept me going through my tumultuous childhood and even teenagehood, all that was creativity and positivity. Those were my strengths. Little would I know, similar to Will Ferrell in Stranger Than Fiction, that both my strengths and weaknesses would birth the man that I am today. Adversity is a fire in itself. Having something to prove can be a spark. Mix that with your strengths, and you may have the recipe for a supernova or a serial killer. I'll break down strengths and weaknesses into 3 parts. 1, weaknesses. 2, strengths. And 3, how to create your weapon. This has always blown my mind a little bit. 98% of you that watch this show on the regular aren't subscribed. Our goal here is 50%. Could I ask you a favor before we start? If you like this show and love what we're doing here and would like to support us, the free, simple way you can do that is by hitting the subscribe button now. My commitment to you is that I promise every week to make this show better. Deep dive into the topics that you want to hear the most about, learn the most about, and even more importantly, continue to bring the energy to you. Thank you. Part 1, weaknesses. I've always been a weak kid. I've always considered myself early on, I'm not talking about now or maybe mid-20s, but as I, grew up early, living in the projects, raised by a single mother, as I visited my father in prison, every Saturday or Sunday. I always felt inadequate to everyone else around me. And I mean that even when I was in Mountainside or Hillcrest, where it's already a low level of standing there, I always felt beneath or lower than that. I just remember just never having a day where I felt confident about any of the decision making that I was making. Whether that came from, having an older brother that was 4 years older than me, who was my roommate, sister 2 years older, and always having to kind of wait in line and ask permission to use the gaming system or pick the channel, or always being told, well, you'll be able to do that when you turn 10, right, from my brothers and sisters. Or my mother always telling me, Will, you can't do that. You can't cook on the stove. You can't, like, all these things were all things that just continued to tell me that I wasn't enough. I didn't have any words to articulate. I think that in that moment in time, all I knew is that a lot of this stuff that made me feel sad. And as a boy, even a boy, not even a man, but as a boy, emotions in that time, I was born in 1989, so somewhere in the early 90s, emotions in that time as a boy, that was not a good thing. Don't cry, suck it up. All these things just told me, one, I was inadequate, and told me that whenever I tried to express my feelings, that was weak too. And I don't know if we really think too deeply about this, about how deeply our parenthood, like the parenthood or how our parenting impacts our kids, or how we were aggressively impacted by our environment and our mother and father, or lack thereof. But it does. It fucks you up for life. It messes you up for life. And I was the product of that. So the only thing that I found maybe a little bit of an affinity to, a strength to, and we'll get to strengths in the next chapter. This was like art. I knew that, I liked drawing, but the funny thing is I don't even know if that started with me or if that started with my brother. Everything that I seemed to like seemed to be what he was already doing. As you're searching for someone to kind of look up to, for instance, Pokemon cards, or, he skated, so I rollerbladed, right? Or anime, or any of this stuff, a lot of it was adopted from my brother. He was rhyming and making rhymes, in his teenage years, and so I started writing rhymes. And in a sense, that's kind of it. I guess that's maybe the natural case of how things go sometimes, but in a sense, that's kind of sad because I didn't have any sort of sense of identity. And maybe this is why I did find my identity in my late teens or my early 20s. Because I know a lot of people that talk about them trying to figure out their path in life and still searching. But maybe because I had such adversity at such a young age, it did help me find a place, a moment in the world. And so really coming back to weaknesses, and I'll try to link this to like how this maybe correlates with you. I'm just trying to give you a little bit more context of how I've processed my weaknesses over my lifespan. I think that you can be weak or feel weak in many different ways, okay? You may feel weak in your skill set, but you also may feel weak in your place in life, okay? And I definitely knew that we were poor. I definitely knew that it wasn't the normal, natural thing to go see your dad in prison. Other people around me or the kids at school seemed to have parents that were there. I'd get oh, where's your dad at? Oh, and you're embarrassed because you want to keep this image of your parent of high esteem, and you also are embarrassed because then you're going to get the next question, right? Oh, well, what's he in prison for? So it was, shame and weak. It was a weakness. It felt like a weakness. There was that. And then I always remember I always just remember it being, whether it was either I was being bullied or I was being told that I was annoying, or I was getting, whooped for making a mess or doing, it just, I don't have that many clean or good memories of my early childhood. And I do believe that I started disassociating a lot of this stuff, because when I look back, it's hard for me to remember exact days and exact whatever. And that's trauma, you know. As we moved to Greensboro, we were in Asheville. As we moved to Greensboro, and ended up, moving in to another apartment. Like, I had this stepfather, this boyfriend, whatever, of my mother's, Bobby, and he stepped into that place of, being the male figure, but it was always a weird feeling. It never felt right. It never felt okay. It never felt safe. And I yearned to be strong when I was just a very sensitive kid. I think I'm going super deep down the rabbit hole, so I'm going to try to kind of pull back up. But like, when you always feel as though you are never enough, especially as a kid, that can either do one or two things. That can crush you, cripple you, just make you immobile, paralyze you, or it can be a fire to do something and prove to the world that you are something. You can be this thing. I wish that I could say the latter, right? Early on. But I didn't. I still stumbled for years after we moved to Greensboro. We moved to Greensboro. We were there for a couple of years. My mom ended up getting aplastic anemia, bone marrow cancer. Somehow, how I felt guilt for her getting this cancer, another weight, another feeling of inadequacy, feeling as somehow maybe I could have stopped this, somehow that time is just now moving too fast. Maybe I should have been better to my mom. Like all these feelings of that you have. And remember, as a guy, even as a boy, you get called names for being sensitive, for being in touch with your feelings, especially in that time. And so, after my mom passed, I remember things got really weird, I think, in my mind, because I figured out a way to kind of just accept this as like, oh, this is normal, this is something that happens, this is okay, we'll just keep on going through. But being thrown into that situation of, one, not having a father there, and then a mom that's dead, it made me an orphan, for lack of better words. And I don't even think I processed that at that time either. I just kind of like made this point of like, this is how it is for everyone. Everyone kind of goes through this. And I do think, in a sense, when you have a lot of things, a lot of adversity that's hitting you, that could be a good mindset to have. Maybe an unhealthy mindset, but it could be one. I remember always hearing from the counselors, Will, wow, you have such a bright mind, so many people that go through the things that you've gone through. I just don't understand how you're okay and how you're functioning and how you're whatever, and this is just amazing. I'd hear that from the adults, like the doctors, the counselors, or the teachers. I'd hear that from people that had a sense of my story, but I couldn't really share that with my friends and stuff like that, or it was very hard for me to kind of share that and open up. And as far as weaknesses go, very hard for me to make friends. Very, very hard for me to make friends. I always struggled to make friends all through my childhood. And I'm diving so deep into childhood because I think that's really where weaknesses start to come up. Where, like, and I don't know if you felt this or feel this, but like you have this thing that happens in your early childhood, and you forever replay that message in your mind anytime it comes up. Oh, I'm not good at working out, because you heard in the gym, or you were made fun of in the gym. Some kid made fun of you, and so now you just continue to roll that tape. And honestly, that's a terrible existence to go through, because these weaknesses that we have, they pile up, and not only do they pile up, just like the S&P 500, they compound, and they compound up, and they become bigger problems. They become bigger problems as we get older. And like, it takes a while for us to start to unpack this and be like, maybe there is something here. Maybe I do have problems. I'm trying to pull this into a circle of a ribbon, of a bow of such, where this can be useful. Maybe the point that I'm trying to make here is the first part of weaknesses is just to really look maybe back at your childhood. Really unpack some of that. Really start to deconstruct some of the things that were going on. Some of the things that as a kid you just kind of wrote off. I'm willing to bet if you look back at the frame of an adult that you have right now, you'll realize some of the things that were going on probably shouldn't have been going on. Or that maybe some of the things that you were going on that you thought was completely exclusive to you was actually, most people are going through those things. Either way that goes, that can be very powerful, because they either allow you to realize that this weakness, this thing that paralyzed you, and every time you touch it, you can touch it, and you can get better with it and get better at it. Or, and I think this is what most people also do, and like on the other side of that, these things that happen to you, you make like a vow, and you're like, this will never happen again, or this will never happen to my children. And that was the burning fire of the weaknesses that I had that created and shaped so much of my identity today. So I'm gonna try to take a lot of the things that I just mentioned and tell you how they relate today as strengths, right? Because a lot of times the weaknesses that you feel like you have right now in the moment, a lot of times later on in life they become the strengths, your superpowers that you have. And so, like, think about that. Any story, any movie that you're watching, you don't watch a movie about a person that's a perfect person. You just don't. It's just not a thing that you do. You watch a movie, and the first thing that you do if you look at any sort of storytelling, is they're flawed. They have to have flaws. And guess what? That's you and me. We are flawed individuals. We have so many flaws. I have flaws through the roof today. And the beautiful thing about that is that you have you need three things, okay? You have a character that is flawed. They have wants, and then they also have needs, okay? And then that is the whole story. Going through the arcs and all that stuff, going through taking this character with their flaws and helping them through what they need and what they want. And sometimes there's 4 parts to a story. Okay, or not 4 parts, there's 4 endings to any story, okay? And this could be your life as well. One, and none of these are necessarily good, bad, whatever. Like, there's just four ways you can end a story. The main character gets what they want, but not what they need, okay? They want it to be rich, okay? They became rich. That was the want. They didn't get what they needed. What they really needed was family and connection. They sacrificed everything to get what they wanted, and they didn't end up with the need, okay? So you can get what you want, not what you needed. You have the flip of that, okay? So the main character is trying to win the big marathon, okay? They lose the marathon. That's what they want. But in turn, we'll keep on running with the same example, they make amazing friends along the way, or meet the love of their life, their wife or whatever. They get what they need, okay? That's a lot of times most of our lives. There's a lot of wants that we want to have. A lot of times we end up getting what we need. We may not get all the way through all the wants, but we get what we need, okay? Then you have the third one, which is the main character gets what they want and also gets what they need. Maybe that's what we should be striving for, because like fulfillment and feeling good, I think the first one is a little hollow, right? You get what you want, but then you didn't get what you needed. That feels empty. That feels like an empty existence at the end of the day. You sacrificed everything. The second one's a little more wholesome. You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. The third one, even better. You got what you want and what you needed. That's amazing. That's great, okay? And then the last one, which this I think is where people can go dark, is you don't get what you want and you don't get what you need. And a lot of times that means that the character, the person starting out with the flaws, never changed, okay? They went through this whole line, and instead of having this big arc of change, they just stayed the same. They stayed the same, just mad and upset, flawed person that they were, and it just compounded, and they never got what they want and never got what they needed. You can have those movies. You can have those stories, all of those. And I think if you look at your weaknesses, which you may call them weaknesses today, whether you've been living with them for decades or they're new to you, like, those are your flaws, right? That's your flaws, your adversity, the things that you have that's going on. Like, you can transform those. So I'll take some of the ones that I found were weaknesses in my past, in my childhood, or even recently possibly, and show you how I turn those weaknesses into strengths over time. So let's start with the biggest one, okay? Abandonment, right? Feeling like no one cared. No one cared about my existence. It felt like I felt like this small in the universe. I made that vow, to myself at some point in my existence, that like I would never make my kids feel small like that. I would never make them feel as though they didn't matter or they didn't exist. So like, me knowing what that feels like creates this really big energy of making sure that I do this and make sure to take care of somebody else. And that feels good. That feels really good. Even though it hurt in that time, it feels really good to know what that feels like, but also know that I can give the opposite to my kids. Feelings of a worthlessness, okay? Which can be with that as well. It took me a very long time to have confidence in myself and go deeper into my soul and realize that I am a beautiful human being. I am amazing. I am creative. I am all these things. That was a journey of self-discovery that took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to unpack and come to terms with, okay? But the beautiful thing about that, once I was able to be okay and know that I'm enough and know that I'm like this thing, I was then able to see that emptiness in other people, okay? And I can see energy, I can feel people. And I'm able to talk to people on these deep levels that a lot of people just do this kind of whoa. I didn't know we were going that deep that fast, whoa. And we have these great and amazing conversations. I know what they feel like because I felt that way. It was a huge weakness. I figured out how to fix it in me, and now I can pass it along and be kind and be good and help other people realize that they are enough as well. These weaknesses, if you can't tell, become our strengths and our super strengths if we let them. Lastly, again, many weaknesses, but so little time. Lastly, one of those, the big ones was I never felt like a man, okay? I always felt like a small boy, like when it came to like relationships, when it came to like being the manly man or whatever you want to call it. And I worried about that for myself and then also for my boys as well, with like passing down and showing them how to become, men. And that one didn't come as maybe a natural progression as maybe the other ones did, right? Where I didn't feel like enough, right? And so now I'm by nature have this fire and drive to make my kids, better and be appreciated, or the, not feeling so small that then I eventually went on this path and journey, and then I'm able to kind of translate to other people. The manhood thing, like being a man, that one was a much longer journey for me. It took probably 34 years of my life. I'm 35 now. It took a very long time for me to get to a place where I'm like, yeah, manhood, I'm a man. These are some things. And I think the way that I was able to kind of go through that and figure that out, maybe if you don't have this fire and drive that's burning you through, I think mentorship, right? And you don't have to have a physical mentor. That's fine if you do. But I think YouTube can be our mentorship. You find interesting people that you look up to, or that have traits that you feel as though that you're weak with. And you listen and you hear and you soak all that in, and you take other kind of mentorship from that. That's what I do now. I listen to these millionaires and billionaires or whatever, these CEOs, and listen to their talks and their way they think. And that's mentoring me to the next level, right? I don't necessarily see it as me having a weakness now in this point. Like I just see it as another thing to kind of do now. But before, very much like felt inadequate, felt like I didn't know what to do, don't know, like, and I think Alex Hormozy says this too, like there's two things that you do. Either you don't know what to do, or I can't remember the other one, but pretty much like if you don't know what to do, then the thing that you need to do is find out how to do it. Figure out how to do it. And so if you don't know how to be a man, start looking and reading as much as you can about it. And I think a lot of that came with that. So like that's another way that you can take a weakness that you have and feel better about it and turn it into a strength, okay? Because I don't think that you have to accept that a weakness is forever a weakness. You can turn it into a strength. Now, flip side of that, the things you're just not good at, okay? We're not talking about the things that just you're burning fire, like I gotta change this, I want to upgrade this, whatever. The things you just naturally don't have an affinity for. I don't think that you need to do anything with those things. Some people are like, especially with school, it's like they want you to get a whole round plethora of knowledge or of so you can kind of have an idea of what you want to pick. And I think that can work, but I do think that there's just things that maybe don't interest you. And people might call them weaknesses to you, but maybe they're just disinterest. And I think it's okay to have disinterest in things that just don't really hit your radar, not things that you care too much about. If it's not impacting your day-to-day, every single day, I just say leave them where they are. You don't need to touch these things that are your weaknesses. Let's let them be. They're fine. There's a lot of things I do terrible. I'm not good at. Fixing cars apparently is not my thing. I'm terrible at it. I've tried it many times. Not my thing. I can bear and grin through it, but I usually have, it usually takes me much more time to actually fix the brakes or do all the things than it probably would take anybody else that has any sort of like this much knowledge to it. It's a net loss return on that weakness, right? So I'm getting more into the practicals of weakness, right? Before we were talking about like those deep things that you're like, this is a weakness in me, but I do want to kind of change that. Now we're talking about like the practical things that you just don't. I'm not good at, all sorts of things. I think you just leave them where they are, okay? Now, in business, right? Let's say you're growing your business and you need to, you got different parts of business, which, you have sales and marketing and customer service and all these things. Some of these might be weaknesses, okay? And you're like, I don't know. I don't even want to touch those. You can either, one, hire people that do, or two, naturally, like, you get interested in one of these things, which a lot of times allows you to be the unlock to learn this next thing and this next thing and this next thing, okay? It's a chain reaction. That's what happened with finance and money. Like, I always wanted to be good-ish with money, but I never made the note of like, I'm a person that's really good with money or really good with that, whatever. Until finally I just it was a necessity that I needed to kind of start to learn and understand as I'm like older, you know what I mean? I'm 30, I'm 35. You start to think about that, and then you're like, okay, and you read a little bit and listen to a little bit, and then you're like, this is actually kind of interesting. So, weaknesses, to sum it up. You do, I think 3 things with them, right? 1, they're a burning fire, and they're super adversity, and so you make a vow on the other side. You're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna be great at this at some point, and it burns you because it's good. You want to get better at it. 2, sometimes you need a mentor. Sometimes you need a little mentorship to kind of get you to there. And that doesn't have to be a physical person. It can be. But like YouTube can be your mentorship. Or 3, you just leave them where they are. Most of the weaknesses that you have, just leave them where they are. They're okay. They're fine. So that's my hot take on weaknesses. Let's go to strengths. Part 2, strengths. Okay. Strengths are your superpower. Strengths are like, bro, they're the differentiator. They are your confidence. They are your backbone. They are the things that keep you safe when everything around you is crumbling. You have strengths, okay? I'm not going to try to help you figure out maybe I'm not going to try to figure out what your strengths are, because most people have an idea. They have an affinity of what they are strong in. So maybe let's not take the time like we did with weaknesses to kind of help us understand how weaknesses can then become whatever. Let's assume that like what your top couple strengths are. The thing I want to say about strengths is there are levels within levels to like a strength that you have. And sometimes you can be blindsided by what you think is hard work or what you think is you being really good at something, when a lot of times you can be this much better at what you're doing. And I think with strengths, like, let's start at the beginning and say, okay, you have a strength and you're pretty much using that strength to get a career and get a job that pays the bills and does that thing. I think as much time as you can, just soaking up all the knowledge, because it's just gonna, a lot of people, they only work on their strength when they're at their job. And for me, because it was such a passion, and I guess I should be careful with the word passion, because you shouldn't always follow your passion, but this is what I did. For me, I was always good with art, okay? Art was my gateway drug, okay? It was the thing that got me to the thing, which got me to the next thing. Art got me through so much mental abuse. It got me through so much sadness, so much feelings of inadequacy, because I did know, once I found art and I started taking art 1 and art 2 or art 3 and art 4 AP, and like all the art classes, it was a continual feedback loop of like, Will, there's something here that you're actually good at. And not just good at, better than the average person, okay? And it was almost like, I remember going into Books A Million and getting every how to draw manga book in there. All of them, okay? All of them. I was obsessed. And for once in my life, I had a love that loved me back, okay? The more that I put into this strength, into art, the more it rewarded me and gave back to me. And I think above relationships, above all, finding something that you can do well, that you feel good about, is one of the most powerful unlocks that you can give to yourself in your existence, okay? I know that there's some people that search a whole lifetime to try to find this thing. I just found it early. It was the tiny little light in the darkest part of my existence. I was thinking about dropping out of high school, being bullied, being hit, being like, just all these things, man. And art was the thing. And not only was art the thing, and this is even cooler, I was in the art room and I was next to other people just like me. The nerds, the misfits, the people that obsessed over like, should we use charcoal or watercolor, or like they were like over here thinking of the things that I think. I'm like, oh my God. And once you have a strength, okay, you can find a tribe, people that do the weird stuff that you do, and that feels good. That feels like acceptance. That feels like you fit in. That feels fulfilling, okay? And for me, that's what that was. I remember making art friends in the art room, okay? And it changed my life. It was okay for me to be a nerd. It was okay for me to not be this football player, manly man, which, by the way, sports are amazing. I'm a dad now, and so like there are certain things that I do think that we should instill and help our kids understand. But this kid was not that kid in the art room. But it was the gateway drug. Once I again was failing every single class in high school, okay? Getting D's. I don't know how they passed me through. They probably saw me as a case, and they're like, yeah, we just need to pass them up. They just need to, no kid left behind. Will's just gonna go on up. Just push them up there. And that was the thing. That was one of the things. And I love that. So I hope that you have something that you found maybe early on that is that thing. Now, another thing with that is When I graduated high school, that became a second strength for me, okay? Because out of my immediate family, nobody had graduated high school. You know, I'm the youngest kid. No one had graduated high school. And so now I have two things that are saying that, Will, you are cool. You're dope. You're good, bro. You've got this, okay? And I took art, right? And I felt, you know, I had the strength, but sometimes with the strength, you don't know if your strength is enough to take you to the next step. And sometimes you start looking at other things. Thankfully, I didn't kind of do too much soul searching here, but I ended up taking art, and then I ended up taking a graphic design class in this college called High Tech Institute. It was terrible. I hated this college. It was, I felt, again, out of place. I felt not a part of something. I also felt, you know, inadequate. You know, all my friends were going off to state or going off to these to get bachelors, and I'm here kind of at this weird institute and poor as I've probably ever been in my life. And so it was a weird feeling because I had a passion for this thing, but everything around me was also telling me that I was doing terrible in life. I imagine many kids go through that and feel that way. But I think it just made it worse because I didn't really have a support system. A lot of kids can run back to their parents and say, hey, mom and dad, I'm feeling terrible. But I didn't have a mom or a dad that I can run back to. And that was a very lonely journey. And this is why I think it's very important for you to have a strength. If you are that lonely person, if you have all these things that are going terrible in your life, and many of us do. Many of us have terrible things that happen to us in life. If you have a strength, a passion, a hobby, a thing that brings you joy, it can be the burning fire that gets you through, that doesn't make you make terrible rash decisions and go negative and go dark. And so I ended up learning graphic design, you know, because I knew art. I ended up connecting the dots. Like, graphic design is pretty much art, just with computers and doing this stuff. And then I ended up learning graphic design, which became like the thing that I was so proud of myself on. I was like, I can make business cards and I can do this thing. And it became another big strength. So having a strength, a lot of times you dive deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into a strength. And I think that's what you should do. You should dedicate a lot of your time and energy to that. Because what happens is you then become a specialist in this thing. And that's what I did. That's probably how I ended up just rolling sevens on my career, is dove deep into graphic design, and then I dove deep into web development. And I was unstoppable at that point. Like, there wasn't anyone that was going to tell me anything different about, like, that I couldn't design, that I couldn't, you know, develop. I knew enough now that I was good and I was okay. I may have not had a lot of friends and a lot of family, but I did have my work. I did have my drive. And that's really important. So now I'm going to kind of jump ahead to a later point in my career where my strength actually became a kryptonite. Because it really can. So jumping ahead, all the way, I land my dream job. I'm working at the dream company, you know, working a dream job at the company, a New Human or whatever, for 7+ years. And listen, look, when you get good at something, you can also get complacent at something, okay? You stop you're getting rewarded, but you don't have to still put in the same exact amount of energy. You don't have to put in have the same amount of hunger as it took to get to the top. And I think this is what happens a lot of times when people get rich or whatever, or you have like musical artists, they fall off after an album or two. is they had that fire and the belief in themselves, and they get to the top and they make some sort of success, and then they start to just kind of just not really do any more work. And strengths are to be worked on, not to kind of just be let be. Because if you just let a strength be stagnant, it becomes dormant, and then it becomes not your strength, and then it becomes worse than your strength. It becomes something that you used to do well, but now you can't figure out how to get back up the hill. Okay? And that's a horrible place to be, where you were number one in your mind, but it's undeniable that you're no longer number one. You're not even number 10, in whatever it is that you're doing, and that there are many other people much better than you, even better solutions. I hit that. So strengths can have a funny way of doing that, because at some point you won't be number one in what you do. And you may do something that you do, like your passion, your career, whatever, for so long that it kind of starts to get maybe boring, or you feel as though you're not learning anything else. You've kind of hit a plateau. And that can be detrimental. That happened to me in my early 30s, okay? I got really good with web development and graphic design. Those are my two kind of cross things that I was able to kind of piece together and make, all sorts of things out of. And I got kind of bored. I was like, I know these things like the back of my hand, but they also don't give me the energy and the passion that they used to. They don't fire me up like they used to. And so I ended up taking on filmmaking. And filmmaking, I'm really happy I went on my filmmaking journey. But filmmaking actually distracted me from getting better at what I probably should have been getting better at. It was something where I was like, I need this so that it kind of gave me a little more drive to kind of go a little higher. But I do think that if you have a strength, a lot of times more better is the answer versus new. Okay? Alex Hormozy, he has a 3-step system. Anything that you're trying to do, can you do more of it? Can you do more of it? Once you do the most of it, right? Let's say you're doing like working out, for instance. Can you work out a little bit more? Can you work out 5 days versus 3 days? Can you work out 7 days? As much more input as you can. And then better. Can you work out better? Can you have better form? Can you do better exercises? All that stuff. And that takes a long time to do. I didn't do that for web development and graphics. I did that until I didn't do that, okay? And then I wondered why I wasn't growing, and it's because I stopped doing more, okay? And I also stopped getting better in that thing. So because I fooled myself, I didn't know this at the time, with those two things, I thought that I needed something new, which was filmmaking, okay? Boop. And so I did start pouring all my energy into filmmaking, which did become a strength because I was interested in it. But I don't know. I think I'm good at filmmaking, but it wasn't a strength. And I don't think that, it just was one of those things where sometimes you have a natural strength, a natural affinity, and you can go to the moon. And sometimes there's something that you're not good at, and you can give it a lot of energy, and you can get pretty good at it, or even great at it, but you just aren't going to the moon. And I think filmmaking is that thing for me. I love filmmaking, but it distracted me. And what happened is this, okay? This is where it really messed with my mind, and I think a lot of you probably are in this situation, is all of a sudden now I have what I'm considering in this time and moment 3 things I'm good at, okay? Graphic design, web development, and filmmaking, okay? And then this becomes, analysis paralysis. Which one do I dedicate the next 5 or 10 years to, okay? And this defining question threw me for 3 years. For 3 years. It was the worst feeling that I've ever felt in my life since being like that little boy that I talked about. I was stuck in this desert zone of feeling inadequate in my career, not knowing what I should invest my time and energy into. Am I just washed up? You know, you see all these other people doing better work than you now too. There's always going to be someone that does better work than you, but like, that's what can happen when you have a lot of strengths. You become a generalist sometimes, and then that can stop you from being able to make directional decisions about your future. Because like for me, I'm a 0 or 100 person, right? Like I want to give something my all. But what if I'm giving my all in the wrong direction? Maybe I'm supposed to actually go this direction. And so what I would do is I'd start going this direction, and then I'd stop. And then I'd go that direction, and then I'd stop. And it was super depressing, okay? To get infinitely good at something, it requires a lot of sacrifice, okay? People will tell you you're good and great until it then starts to impact how they interact with you. And what I've realized now, I'm going to just jump to where I'm currently at with strengths, is there are, again, like we talked about in previous episodes, few people that are important in your life, okay? My family, like being of that. Everything else is a lot of noise, okay? Because there's nothing but hard work standing between you and where you want to be, okay? And so if you look at this, if you have hard work times strengths or your unfair advantage, okay, that's what that really is, times time, that is how you get to where you want to be, okay? If we take three of those three and take away the gas from those or change it, I promise you it's going to take much longer to get here than what it would be, right? So let's, for instance, okay, let's say hard work. Let's say that you put in 2 hours a day in whatever it is that you're trying to do to get over here. You could put in 4, you could put in 12. The more hard work that you do, it's just a known fact. Like the more that you work out, the better your body's going to be, you know? So you're going to get to your goal much faster, okay? Then unfair advantage, okay? This is really what leverage is, okay? I'm not good at basketball, right? So like I could work hard and play basketball and I can get better at basketball, but I just don't have I'm not natural at playing basketball. I do have an athletic build, which might be an unfair advantage, okay? But basketball is just not really my thing, okay? But, you know, if you say web development or something like that, or graphic design, bro, like I got an unfair advantage just because I've dedicated so much energy to it, okay? So that means that the hard work that I'm doing actually is more hard work than someone that's less skilled, less talented. So that's leverage. Now, times that by time horizon, which what I want to make that a point of is how long you do it for, okay? How long can you do that hard work for? That's going to bring if you can do, you may be able to do the hard work in your unfair advantage, your strength, for a week, but that's maybe not going to get you there. You know, it's a good burst, but it's not going to get there. Can you do it for a month? Can you do it for a month? Can you do it for a year? Can you do it for a decade? You know what I mean? Like that stuff's going to pull this thing that you want much closer, much faster, because it compounds. You know, hard work times unfair advantage times time horizon how long can you do it for, is going to pull it forward. And I promise you, every time that I was stuck in my life, it was because I wasn't doing one of these, okay? And I'm going to say that real quick. So, hard work. I thought I was doing hard work. I wasn't doing hard work the majority of my career, okay? I would eat, sleep, and dream design early in my career. But as I got further, more established in my career, I eased off the gas a lot. So that, if I'd given it as much hard work, things would have progressed faster, okay? Unfair advantage. The only way I could have gotten better, read more, I could have learned how to code in different languages. I could have gotten better at app development. I could have gone to different seminars. Like, I could have done so much more to make my unfair advantage that much more by knowledge, okay? I didn't. And then time horizon, okay? I did dedicate a lot of time to this, so I got that right. But what I've found when I tried to start a business, which is a different skill set, I never gave it the time horizon I needed to. I didn't want to learn the things of business, okay? And I didn't want to put in all the hard work. And so, of course, I failed, okay? Failed many times. And I think if you look at those three things and ask yourself truly, like, am I putting in a lot of hard work? Am I working 12 hours a day? Am I doing whatever? Am I working 7 days a week? Whatever it is that you can handle, like, okay? You have a family, you have a life, so keep that in mind. But, like, there are hours opportunity costs that you are burning, okay? That's facts. So being real with yourself and understanding what hours are you burning of your day, that could be dedicated to your strength. That's trying to get you to said goal, whatever the goal is, you can do that. Unfair advantage. Like, how do you keep on leveraging up, that unfair advantage? And then time horizon, being willing to invest. You don't invest in something for one day. Like, if you looked at the stock market, you don't do that. Invest it for 6 months, a year, 10 years. We're talking about 401k, 30 years. You allow yourself to dedicate that much time, yeah, you're going to get there. So strengths it really boils down to those three things, and if you don't know how to get better, bro, that's also something that can be learned, right? Knowledge. Learning how to learn knowledge is a strength in itself that you could gain. And I think that's a weakness. If you have that weakness, I think that one is really worth turning into a superpower. All right, guys, we made it to part 3. How to turn all of this into your, like, ultimate weapon, okay? If I'm thinking about Final Fantasy, bro, like your power breaker, your whatever. I think the way that you make your weaknesses and your strengths a super weapon is very simple, and it goes something like this. A lot of people point the thumb or point the index like this, like, boom, it's someone else's fault, it's circumstance, all that. Pointing the thumb back at yourself in any moment in time, and then combining that with your strengths and weaknesses, my God, it is the biggest thing that can change your life, I promise, okay? So what I mean by that is, and I know that this is, if you've made it to the deep end, this is the deep end. So if you're here, bro, hey, we are here. We have made it to the deep end. This is Will talking. We are here. I'm over here shaking this is propped up on a steering wheel right now. But I think that most people play the victim. And I don't want to say play it, but they default to victimhood, okay? Something happens, and there's 3 levels of victimhood. There's circumstance, there's someone else, and then there's you, okay? And if we look at any of these things, okay, let's bring up something. Okay, let's just grab a couple things. Okay, my cup of coffee, I don't know. it could be too hot, right? I got it from Starbucks, could be too hot, burnt my tongue really bad. I could go into victim blame, okay? I can be like, they shouldn't have made my cup of coffee too hot, which would be level 2, someone else. Now I'm mad, my emotions are all up in atoms, and this is now a problem, okay? Or I could take the other side of that, so that's the point of the finger, or I could take the other side of that. If I'm always like, yo, like, I burnt my tongue, I was like, Will, why'd you you burnt your tongue, bro, what happened? I can feel the temperature of this cup of coffee, okay? I can kind of generally know, like, if it's too hot or not too hot. So I put that on myself, and for me, I'll end up making a rule, a system for myself next time. Like, okay, next time I go to Starbucks, I'm gonna wait 15 minutes before I drink my cup of coffee or whatever, or take the lid off or whatever. You can, if you combine strengths with weaknesses, and also with being able to always be wrong, you know, always be okay with being wrong or being at fault or with whatever it is that you're thinking, like just pointing the thumb back. You now are empowered to make decisions. You are now the leader, okay? If I have my cup of coffee and I'm like, Starbucks shouldn't have made such a hot cup of coffee, I'm mad at Starbucks, or I'm mad at the barista, they're the worst, whatever. I'm now in a state of, I can't do anything about this. It's their fault, they did it, I'm like, here. But, flip side of that, I'm like, man, I burnt my tongue, bro, what are you doing? Will, come on, Will. I can be empowered to fix the problem. And being a problem solver versus someone that always has problems is it's a life changer, okay? So let's take that kind of victimhood and put that in play with your weaknesses and your strengths, and then let's flip that on the other side of, like, if you always take ownership, okay? So if you are a victim and then you also combine your weakness, a weakness that you have, okay? Maybe your weakness is that you're terrible in relationships, okay? And you know it, and you're like, I don't know why I'm so hard to love, this is terrible. But you also are a victim in this. The victimhood is going to double this weakness, okay? Double, compound, triple, whatever you want to call it, okay? Because what happens is you have a weakness, you're like, I'm not good with relationships. I'm not, it's terrible. Or why, and then you start to, as a victimhood, you're like, it's always my partner that's arguing with me. They did it. Or I can never find anyone on these dating apps. These dating apps are the worst circumstance, whatever. You literally make it so that you cannot grow. You stunt the growth of this weakness. You make the weakness bigger, okay? You grow it in a bad way versus figuring out how to turn this weakness into a strength, okay? That's the delta between strength and weakness, is a lot of times empowerment. You know, being like, hey, I suck at cutting the lawn. Instead of being like, yo, those people that cut my lawn, they're the worst, I hate them. You could be like, yo, I suck at cutting lawns, but I'd like to get better. What should I do? And you look it up on YouTube, like, maybe I'll learn how to, like, cut my grass. And that's the first step to turning a weakness into a strength, okay? So, again, flipping over to, like, just pointing, like, the thumb at yourself, almost every situation in my life it doesn't mean that everything is your fault, okay? This does not mean that at all. But when you just point the thumb at every situation, I promise you, start looking in your life for any of these situations, any of these moments where you're thinking about blaming, and it just becomes so natural. When you're just in the moment, you're like, what the hell? If at any point in time, like, oh man, the traffic, like, if you just think and stop, I have control over this. Or sometimes maybe there isn't really a specific solution that's in sight, but you point the thumb and say, I don't really know what the solution is, but the solution itself is now figuring out the solution, if that makes sense. I don't really know how to process my feelings, okay? You're like, I don't know how to process my feelings, but I know that like I get upset, I'm angry. You can then be like, okay, I'm upset, I'm angry. And then you can YouTube or go to the Barnes & Noble and be like, how to process angry emotions. You're empowered. Pointing the thumb is empowerment. And I promise you, that is the superpower. So that's on like the weakness side. On the strength side, okay, still coming back to this thumb thing, it changes the feedback cycle infinite. As far as the strength side, like it increases when you have empowerment and blame is on you at all times. You're kind of like doing this number. Your feedback loop to solve problems, especially when they're in your strengths are already up here. You combine that and your ability to iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate because you always think the problem is your problem to solve. It just grows, okay? So now we're talking about your weaknesses are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? Because you've been empowered right here. We also talked about how we can get better at our weaknesses and kind of grow our weaknesses into superpowers themselves. But then because you use the thumb technique, it's always my fault, I'm empowered to take care of this and make it happen. You then are able to just exponentially grow this stuff. That is a weapon. And it's a weapon not only in getting you to where you want to be, but it's a weapon in how you interact with the world and with people around you. You'll start to hear people claim victim to so many things. And it's great when you are the person that's just like, yo, like you instead of you complaining about something with someone, you now have solutions that you can either give them if they want to hear them. Most people don't, okay? You have solutions, or you can start to think about your own problems. In every problem in your life that you thought was a weakness, right? We started this with how weaknesses can make you feel so small and inadequate. You can start to look at every spot in your life and realize that I'm empowered. I can fix all these things if I want to. Remember, weaknesses that you cared zero about, like, leave them where they are. But if it's anything that you're like, I'd like to make this go to here. I'd like to be great at piano. I'd like to be great at being a friend, right? You can change how fast that actually happens with those three things. With having weaknesses and them being, your just adversity, having strengths, and then also combining that with always pointing the thumb at yourself. All right, we started the show by asking the question, should I lean into my strengths and forget about my weaknesses? I generally believe if you're passionate about a topic, loving it or having some sort of affinity for it or proficiency for it will be like the gateway drug into further knowledge and possibly things that you might have thought you were weak in. Many times our teachers, they grade us on our ability to pass tests. I was a terrible test taker. And so everything that I did in school, I automatically created this, thing of I'm not good enough at science and history and math and reading and writing. All those things I had to unlearn, okay, later on in life, and realize that it's not that I'm bad at any of these things. I was taught wrong. And two, if I so choose, again, remember the thumb, if I so choose, I can make any of these a superpower at will, okay? Will being will right now. This was exactly my case when it came to math. Like, teachers always told me I was terrible. I took like algebra like 3 times. They'd probably just pass me through. And I always thought I was bad at math until I even was like, I'm a creative guy, not a math guy. I always kind of told this story to myself. And you got to be careful with people telling you things that they either believe for themselves or they just put you in this box and you forever live in that box because you're so impressionable. But it wasn't until I took, graphic design, and then I learned web development, and then web development's, about functions and equations and stuff like that, which then led me to business, being an entrepreneur in business. And then business led me to money, right? Finances. And I learned I really actually love math. I love math. And that's so interesting how someone can cast you into a box at a young age and you forever believe it because they said it was so. And having a strength, having an understanding, be like, no, I'm not actually in that box. If I choose to, I can take myself out of this box and I can make this a superpower at any given time. Also, should we try to balance our strengths and weaknesses like we do our bodies when we work out? I don't personally believe being a generalist in a lot of things is the way to go when you're first starting out. I think becoming a specialist in 2 or 3 things that you just beast mode in can give you that cross in the industry that you're in to just accelerate your growth and accelerate your trajectory. That was me, with art, graphic design, and web development. This stuff can work like we talked about before until it doesn't. I had massive blind spots, where my weaknesses were, where my deficiencies were. And it took a while for me to start to build up, and fill those buckets where I was weak in. Because a lot of times, if you're weak in a specific part in your life, that then can be translated over to another part in your life, okay? So as you grow up as an adult, there are different buckets. There are different things. You can be great with your career, but your career isn't everything. And so you leveling up your ability to be happy in general has a profound take on all parts of your life. You learning to be helpful to society, or you learning to learn knowledge. Your ability to start to learn knowledge, all these things, you start to fill them up. And it then creates a more whole, rounded you. And I think that's really cool. It's really amazing. Are our strengths leading us astray? Yeah, I definitely think they lead us astray a lot. When you get really good and proficient at a skill, a lot of times it can be a deterrent for you to actually learn another skill because you're incentivized to learn more and be better at this thing. And sometimes, and it always just depends on where you're trying to get to, that may not be the right thing to do to get better at this skill, because there's actually this other skill that if you were to get better at that one, it might add the next 0 to your bank account or get you to that place that you need to be. The same thing can be said for a comfortable relationship. You've invested so much time in a relationship, yet you feel stagnant, yet you feel at a point where it's just not really going anywhere. Because you're so comfortable, you stay. Sometimes you aren't in enough pain to change. You got to change to change. Many of our strengths can cripple us from making the next step in our life. And I love my strengths. I love what I've done, right? I love that I became a creative director from all of that. But the hard part that I've had to accept for myself as I'm trying to get to the next part in my next step in where I'm going is I have to shed that identity of being a creative director, okay? And that can hurt because it unravels a lot of beliefs, a lot of things that you have put on yourself. You're like, I am this, and this makes me valuable. And all of a sudden, when you aren't that, then you feel not valuable, or you feel as though, well, I worked so hard to get here, but this thing feels so different, okay? And that's part of life, you know what I mean? You aren't always going to be a child, you know, you aren't always going to be single, you know, you aren't always going to, like, there's different stages of life that require you to level up as a person, as a man, as a woman. And we have to be unafraid to take that risk and be okay with that. Lastly, does adversity birth titans? As I told you in one of my deeper stories as we started this, about how the lack of having a father present created this burning fire to this day, okay? Burns deeper and deeper. It could be that thing, that drive that makes you a substantially better person. I definitely think that adversity can do that for you. I'm sure, though, on the other side of that, it can crush you. Use it, or it will use you. Both your strengths and weaknesses are fuel. Use it and burn a path forward. Thank you. If you love this video, you can watch this video now popping up on the screen about setting meaningful goals.